Abdou Dieng, are you there online?
Yeah, I'm here online.
Oh, excellent. Great. All right. Then, ladies and gentlemen, I will start today's briefing with our guest, Abdou Dieng, who is the acting resident and humanitarian coordinator in Sudan. Abdou is joining us by telephone from Sudan to brief on the humanitarian situation on the ground. It's a pleasure to have you back with us, Abdou. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all of you. And it's also a pleasure joining you to discuss this afternoon about the humanitarian situation in Sudan. Let me just start by telling you that as of today, fighting is still going on despite the numerous ceasefire which was announced. Hundreds of people have been killed, including humanitarian workers. Thousands of people have been wounded. Looting is going on in all the country, in Khartoum, Darfur. Yet it's extremely difficult as it is to assess the additional needs of what's going on in the country. However, you have to understand that even before this crisis, what we call the HRP, the Humanitarian Response Plan, was targeting to assist more than 15 million people, meaning 1 out of 3 Sudanese. Out of that number includes 3.7 million internally displaced people and more than 1 million refugees. The needs are all over the place, whether it's food, whether it's water, whether it's healthcare, whether it's nutrition, whether it's protection of civilians. And the appeal which was made to assist the 15 million people was estimated at $1.7 billion. As of today, less than 15% of this plan has been funded, meaning about 200 million, leaving a gap of $1.5 billion still unmet. This is the context in which we are working in here in Sudan, and I will give you the floor certainly to ask a question which I will try to answer. Over to you.
Question goes to Edie Lederer from AP. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dieng, from the United Nations Correspondents Association for doing this briefing. It's much appreciated, especially at this very difficult time. Do you know anything about negotiations that are going on now, apparently to try to extend the ceasefire so that humanitarian aid can be delivered? And there are also reports that the South Sudanese are trying to arrange a meeting of the rival generals in Juba. Do you know anything about that? Thank you.
No, what I can say is there are lots of mediators trying to bring the two parties to discuss and find a solution to stop this, I would call it, crazy war. A lot of ceasefire have been adopted but not respected. My plea today is not only the ceasefire must be respected, but our advocacy message is to open different humanitarian corridors to allow the humanitarian to bring assistance to those who need it. And I can say that today almost all Sudanese must be assisted. And yet, with fighting, it's extremely complicated. So we believe that there should be a ceasefire to stop fighting, but in the meantime, humanitarian corridor must be open to allow the humanitarian to bring assistance to people in need. Over.
Thanks. James?
James Bays from Al Jazeera. There are some worrying reports coming from Darfur, particularly the city of Janina. Can you tell us what you know? And secondly, food supplies. How worried are you about food supplies? Where are you most concerned about? Are there people who are now have no food at all?
Extremely worried about food supply and extremely worried about the situation in Darfur, which was the people were extremely vulnerable before this, and today much, much more. Most of our humanitarian actors are leaving the Darfur, particularly Janina that you mentioned, and this is worrisome. And the looting of offices, cars, warehouses, little food which existed in the WFP warehouse have been looted. So it's a very, very worrying situation that we observing, and we collectively trying to do something to overcome this situation. Over.
Okay, thanks. Michelle?
Thank you, Mr. Dieng. Michelle Nichols from Reuters. Bit of a follow-up to that. I take it you're in Port Sudan at the moment. Can you give us an indication of sort of what the UN setup looks like there? And given the violence across the country, you know, what kind of actual aid work is the UN able to undertake at the moment, if any? Are there any plans to follow up to James's question on food? Like, will WFP try and resume operations anytime soon? And also, what kind of work are you trying to do on the Egyptian border? It seems that your UN colleagues are having trouble getting to the border on the Egyptian side, but does the UN have a presence on the Sudan side? Thank you.
Thank you. Let me tell you that we are, in fact, today, majority of us in Port Sudan, which is still within the country, meaning we haven't left the country. For duty of care of our staff, we relocate, not evacuate. We relocate in Port Sudan, where most of the senior management of the humanitarian are sitting here because of lack of security in Khartoum. And our aim is to go back as quick as possible to Khartoum if the situation allows it. Here, most of what we call the senior leaders are now in Port Sudan, and we are working hardly to try to resume humanitarian activities if situation allows. On the issue of presence at the border between Sudan and Egypt, yes, there are a lot of people, mainly civilian population, fleeing and crossing the border. And today, in a meeting, I asked the same question that you asked, and I was told that IOM and UNHCR now has presence at the border between the two countries, trying to help civilians who are really moving into Egypt. So far, we know there was some problem crossing the border, but report that we're getting, there are no major problems signal at the border. There is a crowd coming in, and they need to go through a certain protocol to enter into Egypt, and they are being admitted into Egypt with a minimum requirement that the Egyptian, they are checking to let those civilian population entering the border. This is almost the same. We also have civilian population crossing the border between Sudan and Chad, between Sudan and South Sudan, between Sudan and Ethiopia, just to tell you how desperate the population is to try to find a secure place to save their life. Over.
So just to clarify that you said IOM and UNHCR officials are at the border on the Sudan side?
This is what I was told today.
Okay, great. And then just one other question about aid operations. It doesn't sound like the situation is allowing for the UN to actually undertake much aid work at the moment.
You're right. The situation doesn't allow. This is why I was saying at the beginning, the fighting is not allowing us to do a thorough assessment to bring the additional need. But I recall what the needs were before this crisis. Very little can be done today. First, because many of the workers have left the country, particularly those with families. And second, the fighting does not allow free movement. This is why I'm advocating for this opening of humanitarian corridor. The situation is quite complex in Sudan at the moment, and we must act all together now. Otherwise, it will become much more complicated in the weeks and months to come. Over.
Pam?
Thank you very much, Mr. Dieng. It's Pamela Falk from CBS News. You mentioned humanitarian evacuations. Are there any specific plans for another evacuation like the one the Secretary General mentioned today from Washington? And as a follow-up to the previous question, there are reports that there's very little drinkable water in addition to the food shortages. Can you tell us about water supplies? Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just start with the first point on the evacuation. I would not call it evacuation for the time being. Those who left either Khartoum coming to Port Sudan, for us they are relocated within the country, and when they move out of the country, we call them evacuation. Part of the staff who came from Khartoum to Port Sudan, half of them have left, and the rest is supposed to leave, let's say, today or tomorrow. On the issue of drinking water, I mentioned it on the news. When I said food, when I said nutrition, I add water. Water supply is a huge issue, particularly in Khartoum. And that also needs to be, because most of the water supplies does not work at the moment. And this is also one of the big concerns that we have for people to have access to clean water.
Okay.
Just as a clarification, thank you. As a clarification on the movement of people from Khartoum out, does the UN plan to provide transport as it did 2 days ago? Thank you.
Yeah, I think the transport from Khartoum to Port Sudan were provided by the UN or beyond the UN by the international community, because the movement has been made by road. Remember that there is no air bridge today between Sudan and the rest of the world. But the airport is not accessible, and there is no air movement. And the movement from Port Sudan beyond is done by sea, crossing the Red Sea into Jeddah, and from there they can take airplane and go to countries in the region. But for the moment, one of our advocacy also is to have an air bridge to connect different destinations for people to be able to move. But so far, it's not happening.
Thank you.
Thanks. Al Jazeera?
Bisan Aboukwik from Al Jazeera, thank you. I have a question regarding refugees. Is there any expectation from the UN for countries that are not necessarily neighboring Sudan to actually receive refugees that are leaving Sudan? I understand that the whole process is very difficult to get people out, but to welcome them, just like what happened with Ukrainians who fled Ukraine. And then the second question is, how long do you think, given the lack of respect by both parties to the ceasefires, how long do you think this humanitarian situation can last before it becomes a full catastrophe?
Now, on the refugee movement, the refugees as well as IDPs, as well as the civilian population, everybody is trying to seek refuge. We see population movement between Sudan and Chad, between Sudan and South Sudan, big numbers, between Sudan and Ethiopia, between Sudan and Egypt. People are moving all over to try to find a refuge, whether in the country or outside of the country. That is on the refugees. Now, how long this is going to last, I cannot predict. But as far as there is peace, and I think this is really what is required to stop fighting, situation may be normalized, but so far we don't see that happening, and we are a bit concerned. I was saying that the last 2 weeks, fighting is ongoing despite several ceasefires which were announced, but yet they are still fighting. Over.
All right. Yvonne?
Thank you, Mr. Dieng. Yvonne Murray, RTE News Ireland. Are you able to comment at all on the presence and activities of foreign mercenary groups inside the country?
Can you repeat? Foreign?
Mercenary groups.
No, that I cannot comment on it because I have not witnessed it. So I cannot make any comment on the presence of mercenaries.
Okay. Thank you. First, we'll go to the screens to Abdul Hamid and then to you. Abdul Hamid?
Thank you very much. My name is Abdul Hamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. I have a few questions, Mr. Dieng. You followed what happened in South Sudan, and you saw that the friction between Salva Kiir and Machar started in a similar fashion. When Machar was about to be defeated, he went back to his Dinka tribe, and civil war started, and it lasted, as you know, 5 years until Machar came back. Now, my question, do you see that scenario could be repeated and Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo might go back to his tribe and extend this kind of conflict for years? The second point, the UN authorized 6,000 in December 2013 after about 8 months of conflict in South Sudan. Do you expect the Security Council to do something similar? And how much the international sanctions can help bring this conflict to an end? Thank you very much.
On your first question, I would say that if nothing is done to stop this war, anything can happen. We cannot predict exactly what is going to happen, but we must collectively work to stop this war. Otherwise, anything can happen. This is what I can say in this context. In the population movement from one country to another one, nobody could expect a while ago Sudanese people moving into South Sudan to seek refuge, but that is happening today. Simply because those people moving into South Sudan, they believe that they can find better situation in South Sudan, which just tell you how complicated the crisis in Sudan is. Over to you.
Okay. In the back? Yes, you. Yes, please.
Thanks. It's Dawn Clancy with Pass Blue. I wanted to see if you had any update on the WHO reporting on a biolab that's been occupied near Khartoum or in Khartoum. Are you aware of this? Do you know which side of the conflict has occupied the lab? And do you have any updates? As I understand it, there's some pretty hazardous biological material in the lab, including samples of measles and cholera. Do you have any updates on that situation? Thank you.
What I know about this situation of the lab is the lab has been abandoned. And WHO is ringing the bell for the possible consequences of what may happen. But as of we speak now, I don't know if there is any decision or taken to overcome that problem. But yes, it's a big risk that was flagged by WHO, which is in front of us, which is part of the problem we are confronted with. Over.
If I could just ask one follow-up. When you say it's abandoned, what do you mean? The laboratory's been wiped of these pathogens, or?
Yeah, the people who are supposed to take care of the laboratory do not feel safe to stay there, and they have left their position.
Okay, thank you.
Abandoning the laboratory. This is something happening all over the place today.
Thanks. Evelyn?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dang. Is there any news out of Darfur, since the so-called Janjaweed is very busy in Khartoum also?
Please, if you can repeat, because there was some noise when you were talking.
Evelyn was just asking about an update on the situation in Darfur itself.
But Darfur itself is a very worrying situation. The only place where we haven't yet seen major problem is Al-Fashir. But all the rest of the Darfur is in a limbo. And we hope that that will be sustainable. For the time being, we have a collaboration of local authority to protect us in Al-Fashir, but we hope that that will be sustainable. Otherwise, it could be like the rest of the whole region now, which is in a very, very concerned situation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Could we just check where you are?
And just to double check, you're calling us from Port Sudan, right?
Hello?
Hi, Mr. Jiang. We were just trying to verify. You're calling, we're talking to you from Port Sudan, yes?
Yes, definitely. I'm talking to you from Port Sudan.
And why is the acting resident? Or can you just also tell us, why are you the acting resident and humanitarian coordinator? Where is the person who normally does that job?
I believe that's a hiring.
The line not very good.
That's a hiring process that would be undertaken. I believe that's all the questions we have for now. So we're going to let you go. And again, thanks very much for this briefing, and we wish you the best of luck, Mr. Jiang. Over and out.
Thank you very much, and over and out.
Thanks. Yeah. No. All right. Let's get to the second part of our briefing now. A short while ago in Washington, the Secretary General concluded his meeting with U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. They discussed the importance of multilateral efforts to address current security challenges such as the conflict in Sudan and the critical importance for an immediate, fully respected ceasefire and the urgent need to alleviate the plight of affected civilians. International engagement in Afghanistan, notably to support the rights of women and girls, and other topics of mutual interest, including the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The Secretary General underlined the importance of reforms of international multilateral institutions, notably the United Nations and the Bretton Woods institutions. The Secretary General also raised a number of issues related to the host country agreement. In comments to the press before the meeting, the Secretary General said that in this troubled world, cooperation between the United States and the United Nations is essential, and we've sent the transcript of those press remarks just now. Later today, he will be meeting with Representative Chris Smith, Chairman of Global Health, Global Human Rights, and International Organizations. Yesterday afternoon, he met with a number of members of Congress, and we gave you the list of his meetings yesterday. The Secretary General will be back in the office tomorrow. More travel. The Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, is on her way to Nairobi, Kenya, to address the 2023 Ibrahim Governance Weekend and to deliver the keynote address at the leadership ceremony. She will attend other high-level events, including a meeting of the Africa-Europe Foundation Women Leaders Network. On Sunday, April 30th, she will depart to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to engage in a high-level strategic dialogue with senior officials of the African Union as part of the outcomes from the 2022 AU-UN conference. Ms. Mohammed will return to Nairobi, Kenya, to chair the bi-yearly meeting of the United Nations Sustainable Development Group. In both Kenya and Ethiopia, the Deputy Secretary General will meet with senior government officials, the UN country teams, and other stakeholders. And then next Friday, May 5th, the Deputy Secretary General will proceed to the United Kingdom, where she will attend the coronation of King Charles III on behalf of the Secretary General. She will be back in New York on the 7th of May. You just heard from Abdou Dieng. I have a few more points on Sudan to mention to you. The Emergency Relief Coordinator, Martin Griffiths, has allocated $3 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund to urgently respond to the arrival of Sudanese refugees and others in Chad. In Khartoum, the World Health Organization reports that more than 60% of health facilities are closed and only 16% are operating as normal. Our partners tell us that the treatment of nearly 50,000 acutely malnourished children has been disrupted. And according to UNICEF, at least 9 children have reportedly been killed and more than 50 injured during fighting that erupted on the 15th of April. This morning, Carolyn Ziadeh, the Secretary General's Special Representative and head of the UN mission in Kosovo, briefed Security Council members. She said that recently Kosovo has faced serious challenges as well as an important collective effort to bring Belgrade-Pristina relations nearer to stability and normalization. She underscored that efforts from both sides will be needed to realize the potential for a positive change in relations, given the preceding cycles of tension, provocations, and grievances that have occurred. Ms. Ziadeh also warned that without increased commitment to the mechanism of renewed negotiations, failures of confidence could worsen within Kosovo, with direct consequences for regional stability. We shared her full remarks with you. And this afternoon, the Security Council will hold consultations on the situation in Syria. Our special envoy, Geir Peterson, will be briefing, and we expect him to come to the stakeout afterwards. Today, we mark the International Girls in Information and Communication Technology Day. For girls and young women to thrive in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics careers, they need to acquire skills to become both ICT users and creators in the digital world. That's why the theme for this year is Digital Skills for Life. And that is it for me. I'll now turn to you for questions. Yes, Edie.
A couple of follow-ups on Sudan. So $3 million from SURF has gone to help the refugees on the border with Chad. What about the refugees on the border with Egypt and elsewhere, as Mr. Jiang was just telling us? And where is Martin Griffiths? Is he planning to go to Sudan?
I don't know about his planned travels. He, I believe, has been traveling. Just, I believe, the day before yesterday, he was in Iran, where he met with Iranian officials, and we'd given you an update at that point. There's no travel to Sudan to report at this stage. As for the other questions of refugees, we will be assessing what the needs are in the various places, whether Egypt or South Sudan, and then see what the funding requirements are.
Can we get an update on what Mr. Jiang said about IOM and UNHCR being at the Egyptian border?
Well, at this stage, yeah, what he said is that he believes that they do have a presence now. So, and we'll try to see whether by tomorrow we can get more details. I'm also aware that that IOM teams have been deployed in eastern Chad as well, and so they have a presence in several of the places where people have been going across the border. Pam?
Thanks, Farhan. Can you tell us if there are any follow-up steps from the Secretariat, from any of UN officials on speaking with the Taliban about the edicts? Thank you. We'll hear more this afternoon.
Well, I mean, obviously, we've made our point of view known through, particularly through the UN assistance mission in Afghanistan, to the de facto leadership. So we're doing that, and as you know, we have a meeting in Doha that where we plan to take this issue up further with different international envoys, as we mentioned to you about a week ago.
Will there be, just on specifics on Doha, will there be some meetings that are broadcast? Will there be readouts? What will there be?
Well, I think closer to the event, we'll try to have a more formal note about this travel with some further details. We're not at that stage just yet. Yes, James.
Yeah, I know you don't have the answer to this because you would have read it out, but can we try and get from UNHCR, I asked this the other day, figures, total figures since this started of how many people have left Sudan through which borders? That would be really useful to know how many people have fled the country in total, because I don't think you've been able to provide that figure at this stage.
Well, yeah. I mean, they've been trying to provide figures bit by bit.
Yeah.
For example, I'm aware of at least 20,000 people who have fled the violence in Sudan into Chad. We're trying to get similar figures for places like Egypt and South Sudan, but we'll need to be able to get those as they come in. People
who've left by ship from Port Sudan. It would be useful to have a big picture of how big this refugee crisis has been in the last few days, if it's possible. And back to Afghanistan, as you know, the Security Council is meeting with a resolution in which it's, if it's passed, it condemns the Taliban's decision to ban Afghan women working for the UN. What's the Secretary General's view on what the Security Council should be doing? Does he welcome the idea of this resolution coming just days before the meeting in Doha?
Well, prior to a vote on a resolution, of course, we allow the members to come to their decisions without any comment from us. We've made it very clear where we stand on the issue of having non-discriminatory policies towards our personnel and towards, indeed, international personnel in Afghanistan. And we would appreciate support for the Secretary General's position on this. But beyond that, of course, we always have appreciated the strong, unified voice that comes from the Security Council on crucial issues such as the concerns that we have about human rights, and in particular, the rights of women and girls in Afghanistan. Yes, Michelle.
Just on the readout of the meeting between the Secretary General and Secretary Blinken, it mentions Afghanistan. Was there any sort of specific discussion about US aid for Afghanistan?
We give the readout from our side, and that's as much as I can tell you from our end of it. I believe that there probably is a readout from their side, and you can see what they have to say on their views on that. Yes, Deji.
Well, actually, I had a follow-up, and then I decided not to. Okay, my question. First, yesterday, South Korean and American leadership signed the Declaration of Washington, which suggesting that the U.S. might deploy nuclear ballistic missiles submarine to South Korea. Would this destabilize the Korean peninsula or even a greater region?
What I can say is that the Secretary General is aware of the Washington Declaration by the Presidents of the United States and the Republic of Korea. The Secretary General reiterates his call for all parties to foster an environment that is conducive to the achievement of sustainable peace and the complete and verifiable denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
But does the Secretary General still think that denuclearization is feasible now, or whether this Korean Peninsula would become what Steph usually said, nuclear peninsula?
I've said what I've said, and certainly from that you can infer that we continue to believe that the complete and verifiable denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula is an achievable task. Yvonne? Okay. Yeah, Yvonne first.
Did Secretary Blinken apologize for spying on the Secretary General?
As far as...
Was it raised?
I can say that since the reports came out, this is an issue that we have raised with the authorities.
So he didn't apologize?
I don't speak for the U.S. side.
Okay, can I just ask another
Yes.
question on Afghanistan? When will we know more details? Because the meeting starts on Monday in a time zone ahead of us. Will we get more details tomorrow so we can write about it?
Yes, ideally. Yes. Stefano?
Yes, thank you, Farhan. Did the Secretary General talk with the Secretary of State about any involvement on a peace plan, that he would be somehow, some way involved in finding a peace plan for Ukraine when they were talking about Ukraine?
Well, there was a discussion of Ukraine. I just refer you to what I just read. I don't have anything further to say.
And then
on
I
that.
just follow up. 3 days ago, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Lavrov, when I asked him if what does he think that the Secretary General didn't come up with a peace plan, he said to offer to Russia and Ukraine, he answered, you should ask him. Any comment on that?
I think the Secretary General has made very clear at this stage his evaluation of the situation and whether conditions are conducive for the parties to be receptive to peace efforts. When there's a chance to move forwards with peace efforts, he certainly has the willingness to do so. Abdul Hamid.
When the Secretary General visits a country, he meets with the executive branch of the government.
President, Prime Minister, exception when he visits Washington, he meets with the legislative branch of the department. Is that a privilege that the host country enjoys, or is it possible that he would meet with, like, members of the parliament of other countries, especially the five-term members?
He has, in fact, met with members of the legislative branches of other key countries, and I would just refer you to our travel website where we have press releases on of all of the Secretary General's trips. But certainly, he's met with many different leaders, not just the executive branch leaders, in many different countries. Okay, Deji again.
Okay, I want to continue our conversation yesterday about the depleted uranium because you said you're not aware of the usage of that. Here is the written answer from the Minister of Defense of the UK. He said, and I quote, "We have sent thousands of rounds of Challenger 2 ammunition to Ukraine, including depleted uranium armor-piercing rounds. Should this raise concern from the UN?"
You're well aware of our concerns about the uses of depleted uranium anywhere in the world, and those would apply here.
Yes.
And by the way, before you continue, on the question of where Martin Griffiths is now, he's in Geneva.
Okay. On 22nd last month, you said the Office of Disarmament Affairs said it stands against the use of depleted uranium around the world. So this is the decision the UK has done, and actually the minister were asked how many of those rounds have been fired, and he said, and I quote, "For operational security reasons, we will not comment on Ukrainian usage rates for the rounds provided." Just want to know if there were really depleted uranium armories were used in the battlefield, should the UK bear the responsibility to or obligation to clean up or at least to control the contamination of the depleted uranium there?
Well, I think that's an issue that you should ask the relevant authorities in the United Kingdom. From our perspective, we're concerned about any deployment of it by any country else anywhere in the world.
So
Yes.
so does the UN feel regret or disappointed, or not, on the decision that UK sent thousands of the armory there?
Well, I've told you what our concerns are, and those remain. Yes, Michelle.
Does the Secretary General have a reaction or response to Iran seizing a Marshall Islands flagged oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman today in international waters?
I'm not aware of that. I'll have to look into it. All right. Good afternoon. See you guys tomorrow. Bye.